Hey there again. All right, this is another lesson in our form preparation, and this time we're going to be doing what's called the exclusive right to sell, the listing agreement, and this is what I call another moneymaker. So most of the forms are supportive forms, but when you have a listing agreement or you have an agreement of sale, those are what I call moneymakers. So we're going to spend some time going over this. This is not too complicated of a document either, and as always, I'm going to show you what goes into what blank, but I'm also going to give you ideas and tips and suggestions as to other things you could do in here to customize it a little bit, and reminding yourself too that in the state of Delaware and any other state, we're not attorneys. We can't practice as attorneys. Creating forms and documents is practicing law, so we are licensed to fill in the blanks. But I'm going to show you how to really fill in the blanks. Okay, this is a listing agreement. It has an EXP logo on it. You could use this one. If you want to use another one, that's going to be okay. I don't have any problem with that. There are other ones out there. I think I'm not sure if there's one statewide or not, because it's usually an agreement between the brokerage, in this case, of course, EXP, and the seller. So let's just start going over it. Now, again, we'll start with homework. This is something you should know. And what I want you to do is to pull out this 4-page document, print it out if you have to, and that's fine, and then read it and just kind of study it and get familiar with it. You want to be able to quickly and effortlessly explain it. A good way to not look new is to be able to understand your documents. So I'll tell you what I used to do, and I got this tip from someone else. I would memorize 1 or 2 sentences from a certain clause and know what clause, what paragraph number that was, so that I can conveniently just drop that into a conversation while I'm sitting there with, say, a seller. And boy, it made me sound like I was a lot more experienced than I was. So let's just scroll through it. There's 1 page, 2 page, 3 pages, 4 pages, and everybody signs. Okay, let's just start. This is going to be pretty self-explanatory. The seller's name and mailing address. Again, as we talked in if you haven't seen other videos, when you get a listing assignment or someone says, come put my house on the market, or I want to talk to you about putting my house on the market, the first thing you're going to do is jump into your MLS, whether Trend, Bright, Sussex, and pull up the tax records. Number one, you want to make sure that the person you're talking to is the person who could sell the house. So if you're, again, using our example, if Betty White calls and says, I want you to put my house on the market, you pull up the tax records, and the tax record says James R. Smith Jr., well, you're going to have questions about that. Why are you selling the house? Who are you? Do you have legal authority to sell the house? So you're going to put the seller's name in there. Also, it's a legal document, so I will try to put whatever seller's name is in the tax records. And we've talked about this before too. So if you know the gentleman as Jimmy Smith and you go into the tax records and it says James R. Smith Jr., that's by his choice for the tax records. That's how he prefers his legal name. So that's what I would put in. I would put in James R. Smith Jr. rather than Jimmy. Now his address. Yep, you're going to put his address up here and here and here, or here and here, and including a zip code. And that's not the address of the property being sold. It may be, it very often is, but that's the seller's home address. So when is it not? Well, it's an investment property, or it's a second home. That happens quite a bit. Or they are handling the estate of one of their parents. So the seller lives, in this town, but the property being sold is in another town. So you want the seller's address there. All right. Next, very importantly, the tax parcel number. Again, you're going to pull that off of the tax records. What I usually do is I usually create a folder right out of the start, right out of the get-go. When someone gives me that call or I have someone who's interested, even if it's, I'd like to talk to you more about the possibility of putting my house on the market, I create a folder online. You could use Dropbox or Google Drive or OneDrive or whatever you like, but I usually create a folder, and it's usually like the street name and the seller's name, and then I put a date in it there too. So it would be like Main Street dash Smith dash the date in numbers. But I will print that tax record and throw that into the folder as a PDF. And on the MLS, you could print it out as a PDF. And that just stays internal. So you want to have the tax parcel number in here, and you want to make sure that's correct. That's one of those numbers where there's a lot of dashes, they're not uniform, and it starts with different letters. Make sure you just, after you type it in, reread it. Okay, where is it situated? It's going to say, it's either, you got three choices here. It's either going to be in Newcastle, Kent, or Sussex. That's the county. All right, and further identified as, and what you should do is write out the full address. 123 Apple Blossom Lane, Magnolia, Delaware, etc. All right. Is the property subject to any existing lease rental agreements? Yes or no? What that is asking you is there a tenant in the place? Because they have a lease, and that lease is in place till the end of that lease. So you're going to click yes or no. Very often we're selling a house that somebody owns it. They've got tenants in there, and you know they want to not be a landlord anymore. So yes or no. The list price. This is what you're going to put the house on the market for. Now, very often I'll handwrite that in. And that's because we haven't decided on a price. With a listing appointment, and when we get into the Great Expectations Foundation course, we're going to go over listing presentations. But one of the premises that you want to stress to your sellers is that you're going to pick an agent first who's going to do the best job for you. And then together, you're going to pick a price. I take strong exception to, and I've lost listings where I came in, I did a good accurate pricing. They seemed to think that I was a good agent. And if you don't have that type of conversation with them, another agent may come in and say, oh, what did JT say the price was? $250? I could get you $280. Oh, yeah, I could get you $280. And it's really just kind of buying a listing. And what I usually tell sellers is, look, unless that agent is pulling a checkbook out of his or her pocket and cutting you a check right there, that number doesn't mean a darn thing. You know, it could be, you know, JT said, oh, you need to do this and do that. Nah, you don't need to do this or that. The walls, the peacock blue with the pink furniture is fine. You know, so you want to have that conversation with it. So usually I will pre-fill as much of this out as I can, this entire form, take it with me to a listing presentation so I have it ready to go, and I'll leave this part blank. Now, I'm going to type it in, but usually, like I said, my listing agreements is usually handwritten in because I'll do that at the kitchen table with the seller. But for clarity of form, it's nice if you could just space a little bit. And then I want you to price this out with a decimal. It's a minor point, but you just want to make sure no one else writes anything in there. So let's say, you know, you decided on 250. You're going to type in 250. And then you can put in .00. I see a lot of people just write 250. I will send it back if you write 250K. That's just not legal enough in a document. You want to be specific. So by writing 250, comma, .00, no one's going to add any other commas to it or anything like that. That's nice. That's a complete number. So, and there's no change, but you know, you're saying that there is no change. Now here, you're going to write this all out, just like you would a check. So, and I usually, again, this is usually handwriting, 200 50,000 and no cents. All right, now I've typed it in. Now, sometimes, if you have agreed upon a price, you could certainly, by all means, type this in. All right, termination. This form here, and you can read this over. This form here is how long the property is going to be on the market. That's up to you. I could tell you this. Most times it's 6 months. I've certainly taken 3 months. I've taken 1 month, and in my previous brokerages had to argue, well, let's say debate with the broker of record, who would just say, who was very old school from 60s, 70s, 80s, and say, why would you take a 1 month listing? And well, I used to do that with expired listings. They're coming off a bad, and we'll go over that when we talk about expired listings. Expired listing is one that was on the market and went off the market, never sold. But they're coming off maybe a 6 month relationship, let's call it, with an agent that didn't work out well. So why would they want to get into another 6 month relationship? So I tell them, I'll take a listing for 1 month. Gives me a chance to prove myself, start the marketing. If you're not happy with me at the end of 1 month, we could just go on our way. If you are, we could renew it for an extended period of time. So I've done that with expired listings, but 3 months, 6 months, I have plenty of agents, or we have plenty of agents at eXp who take it for a year, and that's fine. I'm not going to reject it by what date you put on there. I will tell you this. There are a number of agents who work expired listings, and very often, whatever today's date is when you're viewing it, they're going to put in the end of the month. So let's just say 03, 31, and whatever year this is. They're going to put in that last day of the month. Agents who work expired listings will just jump on. They're very keyed up. It's like the first of the month, second of the month is a big day for them because a lot of listings come off the market. So put in an odd day, and that's what I always say, just an odd number, the 28th, or if you're taking this on the 15th, put in the 15th. 6 months down the road, 8 months down the road, a year down the road. That's my 2 cents. Okay. Cancellation. Now, I've been in a number of brokerages where the cancellation is 30 days. And that's old school. And that's the reason they used to have it for 30 days was, one, the brokerage would think that maybe the seller would change their mind. You know what? Never mind. Let's just continue. But also, a lot of the advertising was print. So you'd have things running for a whole month, or you'd have things paid that you were going to run a print ad, 2 weeks in advance that you've already paid for. So that's why they put in 30 days. But in essence, if you think about it, especially in this day and age, again, think of it as a relationship. If you and a significant other decide to break up, how awkward would it be if you say, well, you got to give me 30 days notice. If you want to break up, you want to break up. You don't want to hang around with each other for another 30 days. And it's okay for you to break up with a seller too if it's not really working out right. But here you could put in whatever you want. I don't recommend 30 days for that reason, but it's not going to get bounced back from me if you put in 30 days. What a lot of agents will put in is 3 days, 7 days, 1 day. I very often, and again, I do a lot of listings, but I'm a little more brazen. You don't have to copy this, but I'll put in 0. Now, I will give them 0 days, and I tell them, and sometimes if they're interviewing 2 or 3 agents, something small like this might be the differentiation between you and someone else. So someone else may be working for a brokerage where the broker says, it's got to be at least 7 days. If it's not, it's got to be 30, or if not 30, at least 7 days. No less than that. Don't take a listing agreement if it's less than 7 days. That's the instructions they get. Here at eXp Realty, we don't have those instructions. So you could put 0. And what I tell them is, I said, look, if there's an issue, if there's a problem with me, let me ask you this, at least let me know about it. You're not going to hurt my feelings. And let's see if I can work it out or correct it. And if it's something I'm doing wrong or not aggressively enough or too aggressively, let me alter my course. Give me that opportunity. But if it comes to a point where you're not happy with what I'm doing, at 12 noon, by 12:01 we're done. You're out of the listing. So that's why sometimes if I know if I'm in a multiple agent situation where they're interviewing 2 or 3, and often they are, I kind of like putting in 0 in there. But you could easily put in 1 day or 3 days. It's up to you. That's just my 2 cents worth. All right, here's where how much you get paid. And what this is the gross commission. So sometimes people get this number a little confused. But here's the other one, cooperation. So this is what's the gross commission. This is what the seller will be paying total. And of this amount, and it's a percentage, of this amount, here's what we're sharing with other brokers. So all commissions, of course, you learn in pre-licensing are negotiable, and that's absolutely true. But for the purpose of this lesson, let's just say it's 6%. And I always like spacing a little bit just to get it. Whoops, 65%. Nice. 6%. All right, that's what the seller will be paying. Of that, we may probably be paying 3% to a cooperating agent, a buyer's agent. Here it says here, brokers as buyer's agents. Okay, with the agent representing the buyer of the property. All right, so here's 3%. So this, understand, is not 9% total. I see that sometimes. This is not 3% and 3% thinking, well, that equals 6. No, the way it works is, in essence, the seller's going to pay 6%. How we share it with others is up to us. So in this case, we're informing the consumer, the seller, that we're going to be offering 3%. Now, on a side note, it's your document to do with. I am not a big fan of, and it's just me, keeping more money than we're paying out. I think it creates a lot of ill will at a settlement table. So I'm going to ask you, but it's not an enforceable rule or law. I'm just going to ask you that whatever this is, you split in half or offer more. So, in other words, I would not want to see this. I'm not going to bounce it back, but I don't want to see this. In other words, when it gets to the settlement table, you're going to get 4%, and the other agent's going to get 2%. Now, there are extenuating circumstances. Sometimes with a short sale, you're acting as a short sale negotiator, and that extra is your pay. I think it should be differentiated somewhere in there, but that's fine. I get that. But for the most part, the other agent doesn't know how much you're getting paid until you're at the settlement table, and then it's kind of like there's just always a lot of bad feelings on it, and that agent gets a little bit of a reputation, of a greedy, selfish reputation. We're not a big community, in real estate in Delaware, so you want to build good relationships. So I ask, cut it in half or give a little more. Now, why would you give a little more? Well, let's say that these people are selling their house and buying another house, and the faster you could get this sold, the faster they could buy the house through you. So you're really getting 2 sales triggered on this one. So to encourage more sales, you may want to put, it's up to you, 3.5%. And you're keeping 2.5%. But you're going to be getting 3% on a sale, but you can't get that 3% until this one sells. So sometimes that may encourage people. I've seen this. Let's really try to get it sold, 6.5%. And we're going to offer 4% to the brokers, to the buyer's agent. So you're getting 2.5%, 6.5 minus 4 is 2.5. So you're getting 2.5%. The buyer's agent is getting 4%. Okay. This is an exclusive right to sell. You learn that in pre-licensing. That means no one else can take this listing. If it sells, you're getting paid for it here. Here's how any deposits are going to be dispersed. Okay, so if there's an escrow on this, it's going to be at the final settlement, or a release being signed by all parties to the transaction authorizing disposition of these funds. I like stressing that. I like having you stress that to the sellers. You don't have to stress that at this time. It's in here, but you don't have to stress it. But at some point when you have a contract, an offer, an accepted offer, it turns into a contract come in, you kind of want to go over that and just understand that what usually happens is the escrow is going to be written. So the buyers come in, they're putting $1,000 down, and some people call it good faith money, escrow money, first deposit money, whatever. They're going to write a check, and let's just say it's $1,000, and they're going to make it out to eXp Realty. So understand that we, eXp Realty, as does every brokerage, maintain a separate and distinct escrow account. One of the fastest ways to lose your license as a brokerage is to mess around with the escrow check. So it's very much $1,000 come in, $1,000 go out. It's not used, and you learn it's pre-licensing. It's not used to pay electric bills. It's not used to buy ice cream for the agents. But it's 1,000 goes in, 1,000 goes out. But also the conversation to have with them is that it's very sacred. In other words, once it goes in there, the broker, in this case me, I can't release it unless I have authorization to. So I can't, if the seller is screaming, I want the money, I think I deserve it, I can't unless the buyer says it should be released. Now, I don't need all that rigmarole for a settlement. I cut a check, or we cut a check to the settlement attorney, Smith Law, whatever it is. That's here upon final settlement or upon release. So if the buyers want their money back and the sellers don't sign a release, as right it is, and maybe I personally, or the broker, let's say, absolutely agrees, that money should be going back to the buyer, absolutely, positively. That's what's right and fair. I know we represent the seller, but the buyer really should have the money back. If the seller doesn't sign a release, doesn't matter what's right or wrong. The person running the escrow account, and in this state it's the broker record, can't release that money. Need a form signed on both sides. So just a little bit of a side lesson. Here's what the seller represents. That it's I could sell the house. It's a good sellable house. Here's what the seller's obligations are. Here's what the seller acknowledges. All right, that person's not under control of eXp Realty, such as other brokers, etc., come into the house and onto the seller's property without listing broker supervision through use of a lockbox and or a key. Seller's caution to safeguard their valuable possessions. It's just a good little speech, to make sure they're putting everything away. Then over here, the broker authorization. Okay, we're authorized to accept and hold escrow. Okay, any advertising, not limited to, is authorized by the seller. Submit the property to any multiple listing service. When submitting the property, we shall disseminate property information with the seller's instructions. Now, what are the seller's instructions? Here we have some check boxes, 4 of them. Seller authorized the listed property to be displayed on the internet. Well, yeah, we sure want that. That's 98% of all buyers find their house. Seller authorizes the numerical address of the listed property. Absolutely, we want that. So I will pre-click this, but if the seller wants something different, I will honor that because this is the seller's agreement. But why do we want the address? Sometimes sellers say, why does my address need to be on there? Well, I once dug deep into, not long ago, and it's the same every year, into what buyers do and how did buyers find their house. What was the first thing you did? What was the second thing you did? What was the third thing you did? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Years ago, finding an agent, looking at, getting into the house, we're all very close to the top of the list. Nowadays, guess what's the first thing they did to find their house? They looked on the internet. And I don't think you need to be any type of research analyst to even just figure that. You're probably sitting there right now going, well, yeah, of course that's what they did. The first thing they did was go on the internet and look around. I want to know what the second thing they did was. And you know what that is? If you guessed drive by the house, you're right. It wasn't, understand, it wasn't call the agent or get the agent or make an appointment to see the house inside. The second thing they did was drive by the house. If that's the buyer's process and I'm the marketing person trying to appeal to buyers, then I want that address shown so that they can put it in their GPS and drive by the house. Then the other steps were, get into the house. So I like having that click yes. Again, you could click these any way you want, but internet seller authorizes the automated valuation of the listed property. I usually click no right there, and I'll tell you why. Automated valuation means that they kind of look at the property. This is basically Zillow and Zestimates, and one thing about Zillow and Zestimates is that it's a pure math equation. It doesn't take into consideration that your house is your subject property is at the end of a cul-de-sac overlooking trees and woods. That's a nicer backyard, whereas another property 30 a quarter mile away in the same neighborhood, their backyard faces other backyards, so that when they sit on their deck, they're looking at, there's 8 houses looking in on their backyard. Nothing wrong with that either, but one house is going to have a little more value than the other house, even if they're the same model, same year built, same square footage, same bedrooms. One house is going to be worth a little bit more. Now, what if there's a neighborhood next to it, where the neighborhood that you're looking at, this property here, that we're writing a listing agreement on, all the houses are 250,000 thereabouts, 230 to 270, that range. Right next to it is a property of smaller houses, maybe 55 plus houses. The average price in there is 120,000. Zillow and the Zestimates doesn't take that into consideration. It does a radius. So it's averaging off house prices with that there. So now if somebody, that's why I don't like it. If someone's looking at Zillow and your house is 250,000 and worth every penny of it, Zillow may say, because it's taken in a smaller neighborhood, it may say, oh, the house is worth 190, because it's just a pure math average. Well, that's not fair. That's not fair at all. Now, on the other side, if the other neighborhood's bigger, there's $400,000 houses, it's going to be saying, the estimate's going to be saying, well, this house, is probably worth 300,000, 320,000. So now you may think, well, that's good. That sounds like a good deal. But in essence, a lot of buyers are going to be thinking, well, if that's what Zillow says, the estimate says, what's wrong with this house? There's got to be something wrong. Maybe it's got termites or the ceiling's falling in or something. So there's not much we can do about it. I would rather not participate in that, just because it's just a pure algorithm. It just takes pure math, like a bowling average. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth on that. Seller authorizes the blogging features associated with the listing property. So, all right, if somebody wants to blog about it, or if I want to blog about it, or if it ends up on someone's blog as a search, some people have search engines on their blogs, that's a good thing. I want that to occur. So mine are usually, and this is what I encourage the sellers to do, they almost always listen to me with it, are like this. Now, that's my opinion. There is no right or wrong for this. If there is a wrong, seller authorizes the listed property to be displayed on the internet. If seller says no, you're going to have a harder time selling that house. So, but that's my 2 cents worth. All right. Authorized to obtain descriptive and factual information from the seller about the property, such as this. In addition, the broker will receive delivery and present all written offers and counteroffers. And again, you learn that in pre-licensing. You have to present all offers. I'll let you read that. Of course, Federal Fair Housing. There's a homeowner's warranty available. What's addendums? Now, this is your package that comes with every listing. All right. So you're going to always have the seller sign a CIS, Consumer Information Statement. They're always going to have to complete the seller's disclosure of property condition. I want you to always, less than exempt sometimes, I want you to always have them complete a lead-based paint, and I want you to always have a radon disclosure. These 5 documents, this listing agreement, this, and this, that I'm always going to be insisting on when you upload your files to our office file, which is SkySlope. Okay, if you want to add deed restrictions in there, fine. A homeowners association information. If for some reason you put a combo box on there, you want an addendum to fill that out. Excuse me. Okay, just took a little break there to sip some water. Then you would include this. If it's a short sale, there's always going to be a short sale addendum with that as well too, if that's the case. All right, if there's tenants in there, it'd be nice if you had a copy of the listing agreement, the lease agreement in there, so you know when it's going to be done. Okay, a septic certification is required. We'll go over that, but DENREC, which is our Delaware Natural Resources, requires that homeowners have a certification of septic. If it's septic, if it's public sewer, you don't have to worry about it. But it requires sellers to have this inspection and have the septic certified every couple years, and certainly before a sale. So if it was done, I forgot what the rule is, we need to look it up. But if a certification was done 6 months ago or a year ago, you should be okay, I think. All right, special terms. Well, here's again, in the other document, we had a creative writing, we called it. This is also creative writing here. So what might be special terms here? Well, I would put in anything that should be noted. So for example, if you oddly, the seller says, I want to take the shed with me, I might put that right in the listing agreement, because that's odd. You could put things in there, you know, the chandelier is not included. And this very often helps to pacify a seller. You know, if somebody says, well, this is really important to me and I want it in writing, even if they don't say it, if they're stressing something like, well, listen, whatever we do, that chandelier in the dining room, that was a wedding gift from our in-laws. Her parents gave us, or his parents gave us that chandelier. We're taking that. Okay, I will put it in here, the dining room chandelier now, and I would recommend take it down, replace it now. You know, you need to replace it, but replace it now. But another thing that I see agents do, and this is fine and dandy, if you think it'll help you get a listing, is they will reduce their commission if they represent both the seller and the buyer. So in other words, let's look at our same example, 6%. And in here, you could type a phrase or a clause similar to, if you want, similar to, should the listing agent represent both the buyer and the seller in this transaction, gross commission shall be reduced to 5%, 4.5%, 4%, whatever you think is right. That's where you would put this. So, you know, in other words, you've got both sides. You're doing the same amount of work, but instead of getting 3% on the 6%, you're getting 5%. It's sellers like it. Keep in mind that you not only want to get this house sold, you not only want to please the seller, you would like nothing more than the seller to recommend you to others. And while they may not recommend you specifically for this act, they may in the future tell others, oh, you should use so-and-so. He did our house, sold our house, and was really very fair, very honest. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about the fact that you reduce your commission by a point if you represent the buyer. So you want to word it carefully, because the whole listing agreement is to find a buyer. So you want to make sure you say, I represent the buyer, because you don't want them confused saying, well, we have a buyer, and the buyer came with, you know, XYZ agency. So you found that buyer, so the whole commission gets reduced, right? No. It's if I represent. See, in this case, XYZ agency is representing the buyer. This is only if I found the buyer directly and was representing the buyer. So you want to make sure you use that represent word in there if you're doing it. All right. And we're almost done. This is the entire agreement. What we're going to do here is, it's good if you sign it. Okay, we could do this in dot loop or DocuSign or Right Signature, whatever one you want. It can be done electronically. And your seller will sign it here. If they're signing it in front of you in what they call wet ink, have them date it. If it's in one of those electronic signatures, that usually dates it already. And you could sign as a witness. Now, here's what gets tricky. Broker's acceptance. Again, keep in mind, going back to pre-licensing, you don't have a listing agreement. You can't take a listing agreement. You have no authority to take a listing agreement. The only one who can take a listing agreement is the broker of record, whoever that might be in the state. In this state, at the moment, it's me. So, and that's Delaware law, and that's pretty much the law in every state. So, unless the broker signs it, you don't have a listing. And a seller, or I'll tell you what, a good attorney can argue that in a heartbeat. So let's just say you did not get this over to me to sign. And a seller says, I want to back out. And you say, you can't, because I'm giving you 30 days, and you're giving me 30 days, and we have print advertising going, and you were doing some kind of print advertising. And the seller wants to, talk to an attorney, and takes a listing agreement to the attorney, and the attorney says, you never had a listing agreement. You know why? Broker never signed it. In other words, this is really between two parties. Keep that in mind. The seller, and I know you're there, it's between the seller and the broker, even though you're handling the transaction, and the broker may or may not ever meet the seller personally. Legally, by Delaware law, it's between the seller and the broker. So you want your broker to sign this as quickly as possible. Now, what a lot of agents do is, if they're doing dot loop, they include me in there, and I get an email that says, so-and-so wants you to sign a document. I could click and open and electronically sign it right then and there. If I don't have that, you need to upload it to our office file, which is SkySlope, as soon as possible. If you don't, I don't know you've got a listing. If I don't know you have a listing, then I can't sign it. And what I will always do in SkySlope, and it's a little more work, but I do like the dot loop. That's a lot easier for me personally. If I had a druthers, dot loop, DocuSign, whatever. But I will download this document, sign it, and then upload it again. Not a huge process, but you don't have a listing till you do. So I've had agents who take the listing, put it in the MLS. I'm not stalking the MLS every day looking for who in our office put up a new listing. I'm just not. And let's say you never put it up, and then 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, you put it in a SkySlope. For 4 weeks, you never had a listing. You never legally had a listing, because this is the other party. In other words, this is the other party. So remember, a contract, and that's what this is, okay? It's an agreement, which means it's a contract in the state of Delaware. Think back to pre-licensing. How many parties need to sign a contract? Well, 2 parties, because that's what a contract is. It's an agreement between 2 parties, and in this case, it's an agreement. You see, you notice that there's nowhere here it says agent sign this. Now, you could witness it, but all you're doing is witnessing the signature or adding your name to it. And electronically, you're not really witnessing it, but you could put that in there electronically as well too. You're witnessing the signature, but you have no authority, and you can notice that here. There's nowhere that says agent sign, and you've seen in a lot of our other forms, agent, you need to sign here. Agent, you need to initial here. Agent, you need to sign this. Not here. That's because this is party number 1, or this, 2 sellers, or 3 sellers. This is party number 2. So the other thing is that when I sign this, you should scan it and just send a copy via email, or unless you're dropping it off, to the seller. They should have that back. I see way too many agents who take a listing, never tell me about it, so the seller signed it. And really, when you think of it this way, it's a contract. You've only got one signature on the contract. That's the best way to think of it. So do you have a contract? No, because you only got one signature. It's like an offer. If your buyers fill out an agreement of sale and sign it, that doesn't mean they're buying a house, because the seller has to accept it. The seller has to sign that, and then the offer turns into a contract. It's the same thing here. I'm stressing this because this is something I see. Most agents just think of this as a side note. It's really quite more important. And it's not for the ego of the broker. This is the only way to make the listing agreement legal. So, and also keep in mind, whenever we're signing a document, we always want to have a copy for the client. When I'm at a listing appointment, if I'm sitting there working over to sign the documents, I always fill out 2 forms. They don't have to sign 2 forms, but if they're signing a radon, I have 2 piles. Here's lead, 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 radon, radon, and I just pile these things up here. I'm smiling because I'm trying to work my hands in this webcam. And I'll just say, this is your pile. So maybe I'll even put copy, C-O-P-Y, right across it in yellow highlighter, just so I can keep them straight. So I'll have them sign 1 copy for sure. If they want to sign 2, that's fine. But I'm just saying, here's a copy of everything you signed today. And then you're going to tell them after they sign the listing agreement, now as soon as I get the broker's signature on it, I'll get you that copy back. And you could even just send that last page. Very often when I'm signing it on SkySlope with a wet signature, I will just download and sign the last page and upload. And to find that, go into SkySlope, go into your transaction, and currently at the bottom you'll see broker signed copy. Well, that's yours. That's yours to download, and you want to get that to your seller. That's the entire form. It's 4 pages. It's pretty self-explanatory. If I just wanted to tell you how to fill in the blanks, we could do that in 5-6 minutes. I want you to know what the blanks are for, how to best work them, some different ideas about it, and some of the legal aspects of the whole document. Again, any questions with this, I'm always available. You could find this form in our EXP Dropbox currently, or our online folder, whatever service we're using. At the time of this taping, it's Dropbox. And if you have any questions on this as you're filling one out, just reach out to me, or your broker record if it's not me, anytime. Thanks again. Talk to you next time.